Dark Knight is probably the least consistent tank in Endwalker when it comes to its usage in Savage. Much like its damage output, it has periods of high usage and periods of low usage. It's received a fair amount of attention for the devs, the change to its invuln in 6.1 being the big one, but now with all 3 tiers released, what is the state of Dark Knight? Like the last video, I'll be using FF logs for my data. And again, like I said in my State of the Paladin video, I only care about rating data anyways. Chances are, if you're watching a video called The State of Dark Knight, you really only care for rating stats as well. So, let's get right into the logs. Let's look at the logs. But before we do that, you should like the video. It really helps me out and lets me know that this kind of content is worth doing. Also, we are closing in on 600 subscribers, so subscribe. All right, starting with Asif Delos in 6.0, Dark Knight sits at 46,002 parses, putting it at 3rd place behind Gunbreaker. If I had to infer, I would say that Warrior and Gunbreaker, the top 2, were just simply more popular. Warrior in particular is a fan favorite in Endwalker, as you'll see later. With Paladin, I think it has more to do with the job's rigid design, and it could be a similar story with Dark Knight, where when balance isn't a factor, it's picked less because of its playstyle. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. I've heard very mixed things on Dark Knight and Endwalker, but moving on to 6.1, Dark Knight actually jumps all the way to the number 1 spot. This one's pretty obvious. 6.1 is when Dark Knight got its pretty big update for the expansion. The changes to Blood Weapon and Living Dead were very popular. Now, I actually want to take a break from Savage for just a quick minute. In 6.1, DSR released, and Dark Knight once again is number 1. We can attribute this to the changes, but also to the fact that magic damage is a pretty big deal in that fight. Okay, so Abyssos 6.2, Dark Knight also sits at number 1. Abyssos really is the only tier of the expansion where I can say for a fact that balancing definitely has affected its usage. It really did have tuning issues. It really reflects in the numbers. The 2 highest DPS tanks are on top. Also with Abyssos, there was a lot of magic damage as well. And this is a trend that would continue on to 6.3. Now it's time for another side venture, Omega Protocol. That's an important one. For both 6.3 and 4, Dark Knight sits at the top once again. I don't know much about TOP, so once again, I'm going to infer that it's due to the way the fight actually works. Please feel free to elaborate in the comments, but Abyssos is the last raid tier. Dark Knight falls all the way to the bottom, with a pretty sizable gap between it and Warrior. So what happened? First off, balancing is just better. Unlike Abyssos, the consensus was that tank players had a bit more agency in their choice during those early weeks. Second, Dark Knight was the only tank not to receive any buffs or changes this patch. Literally 1 patch ago, Paladin received a rework, but ultimately, if I had to guess, like I said earlier, the playstyle may just not resonate with a lot of players. Warrior got some pretty big buffs, and Paladin was looking a lot better after the rework, leaving Dark Knight behind. So, like I said in the beginning, Dark Knight has been a bit of a roller coaster throughout Endwalker's rating cycle. Obviously, there's still 1 more patch to go, but as far as 0.4 goes, most raiders just aren't interested in Dark Knight. But I'd love to know what you think. I've heard very mixed things on Dark Knight from this community, so please elaborate. Personally, I enjoyed enough. I'm not a big fan of the amount of downtime between burst windows. It makes the job feel kind of boring most of the time. Like, the most enjoyment I get is the opening 30 seconds, but alas, we are at the end of the video. Check out this one on screen. Remember, we are so close to 600 subscribers. We are shooting for 1,000 before the year is over. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.